Hey folks, how you doing? It is Wednesday, the 4th of June, 2025, coming to you live from Israel. And this is about Piers Morgan, who has a show called Piers Morgan Uncensored, where he talks about, you know, political issues, current affairs, things like that. And he recently invited a guest on who is basically a comedian, right, who appears sometimes on the Joe Rogan Experience, a guy by the name of Dave Smith, who for some reason is put up as some kind of commentator on the topic of Israel and Palestine, Israel, Hamas, the war, and all that. Even though he's literally a comedian who doesn't have any political background. So, okay, whatever. He's just a person who shares his opinion. I don't even, I mean, maybe he is a comedian. I've never heard him say anything funny, but apparently he's a comedian. To be fair, I haven't exactly listened to him a lot. I've only seen him ever talk about this issue, clearly in an uneducated way. Like, so when people say to me as a comedian, okay, well, that makes sense. Like, there are plenty of comedians who know about this topic, and there are plenty of comedians who don't. He's clearly one of them who doesn't, but he thinks he does, which is the worst kind. And he's, sort of what you might call a classic anti-Israel Jew, who is, on the fringe of the Jewish community that he is a part of. And he just thinks, I guess he thinks, I don't know what he thinks, but he has that vibe of like, a person who's like against the community he's in, and for whatever reason, even though he's not Israeli or anything, he's just an American dude, and just has these strong opinions because he has a loud mouth and not much to fill the air with that is too intelligent about the topic, but he does anyway, because that's his bread and butter. So I don't fault him for that. But what I do fault him for is spreading lies and really blood libel against his own people. And Piers Morgan, who's the host of his show, also spreads blood libels against the Jewish people. And Piers Morgan is somebody who just goes with whatever the trend du jour happens to be. So, like, when October 7th happened, he was absolutely unquestionably on Israel's side, and he said, listen, Israel has a right and duty to respond. Nothing can justify what happened on October 7th. It was a horrible act of terrorism, etc. It was barbaric. It was all these terrible things. But now, in the recent months, he's kind of shifted, and he's fully on board with the supposed pro-Palestine, but they're really the anti-Palestine crowd that support Hamas and all that. Because even though he says he doesn't support Hamas, he clearly does, because it's topical and trendy and cool to do that. Right? And also, he happened to really make the switch the moment the UK said that they were going to just make an effort to support a state of Palestine, like a month ago, when France and the UK and Spain and I think Germany or Spain, whatever. Anyway, those three nations or four nations said that they would, do everything they could to declare a state of Palestine in June. Sure, good luck. Declare it. Go ahead. What's it going to change on the ground? Literally nothing. By the way, they wouldn't be the first state in the world to recognize a state of Palestine, right? Hardly the first. There still isn't a state of Palestine. Do you know why? Palestinians don't want a state. If they did, they would have had one 77 years ago. But they didn't. They rejected it outright, and they've rejected every single opportunity since then to have one. Do you know why? They don't want a state living side by side next to the Jews. They want to kill all the Jews and get rid of Israel and make all of Israel Palestine, right? That's what they want. Well, as a Jew who happens to be in Israel, That's what I have to say. So, yeah, don't like it. Okay. Now, why do I say that? Why do I make that gesture? Well, because it's a bit shaped like the map of Palestine, isn't it? Look at that. Yeah. So reminds me of the state of the shape of Israel. It's the big FU for the world that tried to kill us for so long and failed so miserably. All your anti-Semitic vile from the left, the right, the center, the north, the south, the east, the west, the people who say they love the society they live in, the people who hate it. I'll just give you an example. Recently, Piers Morgan and Dave Smith had on a very well-spoken lawyer who is from the UK, and she defends Israel quite vociferously in her public debates and discussions. And they basically wouldn't let her get a word in edgewise in any single time that she was trying to make a really good point. Of course, Piers Morgan would interrupt her because he's an asshat, and all he knows how to do is, that. Because God forbid somebody should get a point over him on his own show, but they do all the time. And it was very obvious that she was destroying him in the discussion, but he just kept saying, "Oh, BS, BS, bullshit, bullshit," just basically shouting over her in order to, seem as if he's right. Well, it doesn't make you right, Piers. For example, he's been spewing the lie that Israel is committing a genocide and war crimes. He's been saying that Israel plans to get rid of the Gazans from Gaza. First of all, he's quoting like one or two insane far-right ministers in the Israeli government who, yes, they're in the Israeli government, but no, they're not in the war cabinet. No, they don't get to make that decision. And more importantly, he's been saying that they're planning a genocide because they want to vacate the Gazans from Gaza. That's not what a genocide is. A genocide is the intent and the actions taken, not just the intent, but the actions taken upon that intent to actually eliminate as many people from a people group as possible, right? Like the acts of actually killing people who belong to a particular people group just because they belong to that particular people group. If you have the intent to do that and you act upon it, that is committing a genocide or attempting to, right? Vacating a people from a piece of land isn't. Also, the majority of people living in Israel are from this part of the world, North Africa, the Middle East. Right? Most of Israel isn't white. Most of Israel, over many generations, has been living in the Middle East. And of course, DNA-wise, Jews are from this land. So we are the people from this land. So if we're clearing out a piece of land and we're replacing the people, if you want to say that, which we wouldn't be, but if we are moving away people from this land and filling that same space with other people from this land, many of whom, by the way, are also Arab Muslims, just like the people living in Gaza, right? There's 2 million Israeli Arabs. Well, if 2 million if 2 million non-Israeli Arabs happen to leave, 2 million Arabs leave Gaza and 2 million Arabs enter Gaza, how is that ethnic cleansing? I'm not being facetious. I'm like, you tell me. So 2 million Arabs who are violent and genocidal, who actually want to kill the Jews and Israelis just because they're Jews and Israelis, who actually wants to destroy the state of Israel, They don't want to build up a state of Palestine. They want to destroy a state of Israel, and they want to replace it with a godforsaken Sharia hellhole as part of an Islamist caliphate. Yeah, if those 2 million people leave, and 2 million peace-loving, democratic, prosperity-minded, wealth-building, productive Arabs happen to move in, how is that genocide? How is that ethnic cleansing? If the 2 million people that leave go to a neighboring country that is very much like them, where there are millions of people with their mindset, where they will easily be absorbed into that culture, yeah, how is that genocide? How is that ethnic cleansing? Oh, but you might tell me, but in Egypt they're not welcome because Muslim Brotherhood isn't welcome there. Well, the Muslim Brotherhood exists in Egypt. That's where they were created. That's who spawned the Hamas. How is that ethnic cleansing? To send them to Egypt? Oh, Egypt doesn't want them there because of the Muslim Brotherhood problems. Egypt can move them to another country. Again, how is it ethnic cleansing? If millions of Arabs in Israel were to move to Gaza, obviously after it's rebuilt, if they wanted to, they don't have to, but if they wanted to, and if Israel rebuilds Gaza, builds settlements and whatever, and Israeli Arabs repopulate Gaza along with Israeli Jews, why not? How is that ethnic cleansing? It's literally the same people. It's just one group of the same people are extremely violent. Who wants extremely violent neighbors? Do you want extremely violent neighbors? And one group of the people is not extremely violent and only uses violence as a form of last resort when they don't have another choice, that they have to defend themselves with that violence. Right? If you can tell me how that is ethnic cleansing, I'm all ears. Meanwhile, Piers Morgan goes on the show and says Israel is genocidal because of that. He then goes on to talk with the Dave Smith guy, who they both spread the lie even further that Israel is starving the Palestinians and had a blockade, didn't allow any aid in for 90 days, which is a complete and total lie. Okay? The actual blockade on aid deliveries was 7 weeks at the most, and it happened because the Hamas violated the ceasefire agreement, and more importantly, was known to be stealing more than half the food. And it was known that they had months, if not years, worth of food stolen and stored. And what do you know? This week, about a week ago now, when aid started to be distributed under this new American-Israeli joint program, and the people who were supposed to get it, had a little bit of chaos on the first day and didn't want to put up with the shenanigans anymore of what was happening to them by their own misleaders, right? I don't want to call them leaders, but misleaders. What happened was very clear. Right? They went to one of the places where they knew the aid was being stored in the middle of the big city there in Gaza, and they raided the World Food Program warehouse where they knew there was food being held and guarded and by armed Hamas terrorists. And I don't call them gunmen or militants. They're freaking terrorists. And they ransacked the place. And good for them because it's their food. So they took the food that belonged to them and they demanded access to more of the food that Hamas had clearly been hiding. And it turns out, exactly as Israel said, Hamas had many months worth of food in stores across all of Gaza, in addition to the food that they've already stolen and sold on the market, which is illegal. That's a double crime. Plus, they mark up the price. It's a triple crime. Right? So, Israel was right the whole time and was telling the truth the whole time. And the Gaza people proved that when they literally took the food back that was their food to begin with, and that Hamas had illegally stolen and held from them. And didn't want them to get access to it. Now, why would Hamas not want Palestinians to have access to food? Can you think of a reason? Because if you can't, believe me, I will tell you the reason. You ready? You can't think of the reason? Okay. The easier it is for people like Piers Morgan and Dave Smith to spread anti-Semitic lies about Israel. Like to say, oh, those evil Israelis trying to starve the poor Palestinians, when nothing could be further from the truth. Right? It's Israel who's actually feeding them. And it's never mind the insanity of people complaining, oh, well, why is the food all from Israel? Where do you expect them to bring it from? Timbuktu? It's from Israel because that's where the food is that is nearest to them. And Egypt hasn't bothered to give Israel food for the Palestinians. Right? Hasn't bothered to say, here, we got a bunch of trucks you can check. We promise there's no bad things in them. They haven't done that. Right? And we know Egypt makes a killing, literally, from the Hamas, taking their money to allow them to smuggle things in. Now, of course, that formula has changed a little over the last couple of years because, well, Hamas doesn't exactly have the same access that they used to be able to smuggle those funds around, but they still can and they still do. They still have plenty of shekels in the Gaza Strip. It's just a different question of how they move them around. And it's not so easy. But the point is, people like Piers Morgan, people like Dave Smith, and there's many of them across the media, but I point to them because they happen to be loud mouths on classic. There've been those, frankly, have changed drastically over the years, but never mind. Let's say we could pretend we could go back to that style. That to me is proper debating. But they don't do that on TV. They still call it a debate, even though it's not. It's a discussion at best, or an argument, which is usually what things devolve into on TV. And they know that I could end their arguments very, very quickly. You know, they know that somebody like me could do that. That's why they don't have people like me on their shows ever, right? Because I can literally end every single argument they have very simply when it comes to the topic about Israel. And they know it. That's why they never book guests like me onto their shows, because they're frankly chicken. They're frankly afraid, and I get it. They want sensationalist soundbite. They want somebody that looks and sounds maybe a certain way to fit a certain stereotypical narrative. Right? That's what they want. Doesn't matter if you like that fact. That is what they want, and that's what they're going to book on their shows. And I get it, and they have every right to do that. And the reason that somebody like me will not ever host a show like that is because I'm not going to sit there and spread lies and disinformation and misinformation for a living. And you can say, well, why don't you tell the truth on your show? Well, I do tell the truth on my show. And you can see the result, right? The people who watch get it. This isn't a show, it's a vlog. Yeah, it's right, exactly. I don't put a lot of production value into it. To me, spreading the truth is more important than how you present it necessarily when it comes to these kind of issues. And you could say, well, presentation matters. Yeah, presentation does matter because people are largely smooth-brained. I don't mean that in any offensive way. People are largely smooth-brained. The vast majority of humanity is pretty smooth-brained. So they need to be approached in such a way that things can be easy for them to understand. Things can be explained to them in an easy way. Again, that's not a diss. It's not meant to be insulting or anything. Just a fact. So yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that for this particular episode because I don't want to spend too long dawdling on it. But my point is, if you're ever wondering why Piers Morgan and Dave Smith seem so virulently anti-Israel, well, it's because they are. Because it's the trendy thing to do. I guarantee you, 100%, if it was somehow cool to be supportive of Israel, again, they'd be right on that bandwagon. These guys are literally, wherever the good time is, that's where they want to be. They could care less about the truth. They certainly don't care about Israel. They definitely don't care about the Jewish people, whether we survive or not. And right now, the easy money, is to be with the side of the terrorists because they have the money from Qatar, and they've just given the president of the United States a $400 million plane. So they feel confident that they can keep bribing the world and its influencers to doing whatever it wants, even though the president of the United States himself has made it kind of eminently clear that he supports Israel in many, many ways, and he clearly does. But that said, and as I always said from the beginning, it is a very transactional relationship. And the moment that he could see an opportunity to do something for himself that happens to stab Israel in the back, I have no doubt that he would. And the proof of that is what he did when he did the Middle East a few weeks ago, to which some people say, oh, it's nothing serious. So he visited Saudi Arabia and the UAE and Qatar and Oman, but he didn't visit Israel. Okay, if you say so. I don't buy it. So yeah, that's why a lot of influencers, especially after Britain and France and Spain said whatever nonsense they did about recognizing a state of Palestine in 2025, this month in June. That's why Qatar and its ilk feel no compunction. They feel no compunction about saying the kind of utter nonsense that they've been saying. Late and siding with the Hamas. You know what's really funny also, I've noticed that on YouTube, a lot of video channels cover this topic. They won't say Hamas and they won't say terrorist and they won't say killed or murdered. They'll say things like unalived, which I've done a few times, but sarcastically. They won't say Hamas, they'll say H-mass or H-group or H-word, and they won't say terrorist, they'll say terrorist. Well, to me, I'm not going to play those games on my own personal channel. If you're putting out content and you have a following and you live on the ad revenues from that, which clearly I don't, and you're afraid to say those words, maybe, just maybe, you should not be relying on that platform for your living. Maybe, just maybe, you should find something else to secure your living, because you're letting an organization like Google determine how you speak. They're literally policing your words, and you're literally succumbing to their willpower, saying, "Oh no, I won't say that. I'll call them militants or terrorist, or I'll say other words for it." Even if you have every good intention in your body and in your mind and in your soul, and if you're only doing good things and you're only spreading good content, if you're allowing these people to control your words just so you can get more reach, you've already lost. I don't know how else to explain that to you. It's a fact. And if you allow people like Piers Morgan and Dave Smith to spew lies and go unchallenged by your show, even if you have a tiny show like mine, but you talk about these topics and you don't say anything about that kind of vile hatred when it's topical to do so, to condemn it, like when it's relevant, when it deserves to be called out and condemned, as I am doing now, then you're part of the problem. Because you're extending and prolonging the war. When you say things like Israel has to let in the press, well, hang on. If the Hamas controls Gaza, why doesn't Hamas let in the press? Oh, because they can't, because Israel controls the borders. Got it. Do you know why Israel controls the borders? Have you figured it out yet? Because whatever goes into Gaza, unless it's a hostage or an Israeli soldier, ends up not doing very good things there, for the most part. And that goes for the press, for the most part. Also, this whining about no press in Gaza is a little bit more than a joke. And what it demonstrates is that the mainstream traditional press is obsolete, because there's tons of cameras there recording tons of things that keep getting broadcast on all the mainstream media networks somehow. So obviously they don't need reporters on the ground to film stuff. By the way, reporters don't usually do the filming of stuff when you send a TV crew with a TV reporter. The reporter stands in front of the camera and talks. The cameraman is the person that films. The sound man is the person that records the sound. Yeah, they're different people. Even in 2025, they have 3, 4, 5 people teams. Right? When you see a person in a, like, if ABC News or CBS News or cable news or, CNN or Fox or whatever, you see one person on camera, there's like 3, 4, 5 people on that team, usually. It can be a 2-person team. It technically could be a 1-person team, but it rarely ever is. Especially not when you have to have all that high production value, quality, etc. So anyway, just a thought. Thought I'd share it. And yeah, I mean, I'm all for free. Go ahead. I think let them all into Gaza. Why not? But the problem is they're going to actually prolong the war by being there, because they'll spread more lies. They'll spread the narrative that Israel's doing bad things when it's actually Hamas, right? Every single time they say, oh, Israel did these bad things and Israel disproves it, you never hear about those things, right? You only hear the lie, and you never hear about the correction. They don't put they put 1% of the effort, if that, into saying, yeah, we made a mistake. Sorry, we were wrong. Oh, the next story. They spread the lie with thunderous applause, but the erratum, the correction of the lie, you wouldn't know that it ever happened. And that's the point of this whole video. It's easy for these guys to spread lies, whether they're Piers Morgan or the BBC or CNN or anybody, Fox News or any news channel, Bloomberg, it doesn't matter, CNBC, whatever, whoever covers any topic. It's easy for them to spread lies. But when it comes to spreading corrections, it doesn't matter if they do them or not. It's as if they don't, because they do the most minimal amount of it possible. And that's that. Hoping for peace, and I hope that the hostages come home ASAP. As many of them alive as possible. And I hope that this awful war ends soon, and that people can get back to better lives in this area. And I hope that you're all doing well. And until the next time, folks, peace.